Hello, today I'm going to walk you through my game called the Skeleking. We'll walk through the game, I'll do a little demo, and then we'll walk through the code. I'll explain different reasonings behind using what techniques and whatnot, and then we will use Bitbucket to commit the final commit and show off the version control that I've used. So let's have a look at the game. It is obviously still in development. There's issues and improvements that I would make, but as you can tell, we have background music playing. The player is completely functional and moving. Projectiles and collisions work perfectly. We have two NPCs and a custom asset made background for a tile set I found on opengame.org. So every single time that you shoot one of the NPCs, they make a sound effect, which sort of confirms that the hit is happened. We also have a terminal that opens up in the background as well, if I get the player out of the way, and we have the terminal that appears here and it updates the player score continuously. So the skeleton, the regular skeleton, will account for 5 points, so it will increase for 5 points, and the skeleton just disappeared. And then the Skeleton King is 10 points. Skeleton King takes 10 hits to kill, and then the skeleton takes 5, I think. There you go. And then it'll respawn. When the enemy is killed, they'll respawn at a predetermined location. I think the Skeleking has gone onto the right hand side of the screen, but I've got it moved over. And it does a little sound effect of a when the respawn loop has occurred. So the original plan, or the actual plan, the loop that I was trying to implement, was for 3 respawns to occur and then a final game sound to happen. So if we leave it there, just want to point out collisions with the player aren't currently implemented. I couldn't figure out how to do it. Right, let's close this down, and I want to show you what the game loop respawn looks like. The respawn looks like, even not the game loop. So if we go all the way down, I tried to implement a do while loop, which is a function that will do the insides of the interior of the function while a criteria is met. So the loop doesn't work because there isn't a secondary outcome that can be completed before the loop completes itself. So I've put in this break here to say the loop will go through, read if the NPC is NPC1 is dead, is true, then NPC respawns, and then it will iterate on the value of respawn counter. So the plan was, every time a respawn happens, this will increase by 1, and then when it is equal to or more than respawn counter, a max respawn counter, as says down here, then this criteria will be met down here, which is if they are both equal, then 2 pieces of sound effects will play, and this will be printed out into the terminal. So if I just show you what that would look like, I couldn't figure out how to fix it. I spent absolutely hours and hours and hours doing it, but when the respawn criteria has been met, I added in 2 sound effects, 1 little music thing, and I actually recorded my own voice and voice changed it and stuff like that to make it sound like the game over, you win, which I was really happy with, actually. So, and it outputs in the terminal, all enemies being defeated. So the idea was once 3 respawns has been done, then that sort of thing, the loop would happen. But it didn't work. I couldn't fix it. So to start, if we look at the npc.cpp file to explain the code, this one file here will basically cover the npc2 and the players.cpp file, because they have the same functionality within them, just different variables. So the npc.cpp has one main body up here, which determines the variables that will be defined later on with different functions. So you've got the health, you've got the points value, you've got the max range that the NPC can walk at from the player, how long it takes to be able to walk to the target, and I've declared the two audio loading files, the two files that will be loaded for the audio playing. You've got the initialization function, of which in here you have the animations that will take place for the actual NPC King Sprite player, NPC. You've got the vector F, which will determine the position of where it spawns when it initially spawns and gets drawn into the game, as well as the file used for the actual sprite itself. You've got a deconstructor of the NPC character and the update function, which is called continuously to see whether or not, if it is not dead, then it will use the AI function, which is coming up next. Else, the state is dead, and the velocity will it'll make it stand still. And then it will call the update sprite, a sprite update even. Next, we have the NPC AI. So this is the function that controls the movement of the NPCs. So we draw the player, or we read what the player is doing, get the distance between the player and copy the player's position, and then you use the vectors to subtract our position to get a vector to player. If the player is within the range, then stop and fire, but I haven't implemented that yet. Else, it carries on following the player and it walks towards the player. And the state is idle, and this is the rest of the arrive pan. So we have the set game function, the get animations, where it will read what the current animation state is and whether or not it is dead, idle, walking left, etc., etc. We've got the take damage function. So this one is basically reading the int damage variable here, and the health is minus or equal to the damage. And every time that one of the thing takes the NPC takes damage, the audio snippet will play. So effect.play will be played. So if we look into the .cp, no, it's not. If we go back up to the initial thing up here, so effect.load will be resembling .play. So it will play the zombie moan, and then load 2 will be play 2. So if we go down here and look at play 2, effect 2, it will be for the second sound effect, which I think, if I remember right, is the ding sort of respawn sort of sound. So if the health is greater than 0, is not greater than 0, then the state equals dead, and then the effect sounds, and then the respawn loop occurs. If it's dead, if dead is true, because it's a bool, so it's a true or false statement, and if his health is greater than 0, the return it is a false, so it's not dead. However, if it is 0, then return it, and then we call the respawn function. So this is the respawn function down here, and the respawn function is literally just determining that the health is set to 100, his state will be reset to idle from dead, and the position is then set to somewhere else on the screen. I don't know why that number is so huge, that's ridiculous. That's a bit of a mistake then. And then it sets the position. I did try and do a respawn loop. This was my first iteration of the respawn loop, but since then I've managed to redo it into the game.cpp file, which works a lot better, actually works this time around. But I have got the errors with it, like I explained before. And this is the get and set points for the actual values of the values of taking damage and accumulating points for the player. So this is the audio.cpp file, along with the .header file. So these are the prototype functions that have been declared, and then the actual functions have, these are the prototype functions, and then they've been declared in the CPP file. And then whenever a function or a class needs to be called upon, then we include the .header file within the top of the CPP file of the other document, and then the code within these files will be used within the other document as well. So every time that I have used an additional audio file, I have created an additional load and play. So as you can see, we've got load, play, and then we've got load 2, play 2, load 3, play 3, because the maximum number of audio files that I've played in one of the other classes has been 3 audio files. So I've got 3 of these separate plays, which works brilliantly. There's lots of different things that I would like to improve upon the actual game if I were to carry on developing this. So I'd like to add multiple levels when the NPCs had been killed and those 2 audio pieces are played to signify that the game loop the respawn loop had been completed. Then one of the cave entrances was light up. I've mentioned this in the document, and then you'd walk through it, go through to the next level. Difficulty would progressively get harder because the enemies will be different, stronger. There'd be pickups like weapon pickups to do melee damage or whether or not to do range damage. Different power-ups, so like speed boosts. Lots of different features like that. There's a lot that I would improve and add. I think the respawn locations of the actual NPCs, they're not correct. It's taken a lot to be able to tinker around and get into where they are at the moment, and every time I do it, this seems to break it or whatever, so there's a bug in there somewhere. But yeah, there's a hell of a lot that I would improve and change. Yeah. Because it's pushing it for time, I'll quickly steam through all of the different bits and bobs of the game.cpp. So we've got the actual main game function, which calls the actual audio and initializes the initial player, NPC and NPC2 variables, along with the game window and etc. etc. We've got the initialization, which initializes the actual window, generates the actual background, and the statements of if the background does not load then. We've got the deconstructor, which deletes all the entities, so that's the background, not the background, sorry, it deletes the actual player, the NPC, the NPC2, and the bullets. Destroys the background using SDL destroy texture. We've got the draw, we got the update function, which actually renders the bullets as well, and inside the update function we have the respawn loop along with collision detection as mentioned earlier. We got the process inputs within the game CPP file as well. So in the event of the up key being pressed, down key being pressed, escape, and this is what will happen. We have the set player, run game loops, the main game loop, which actually sets the refresh rate, etc., etc. Create bullet function, collision detection, etc., 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 etc. We've got the main function, the main CPP file here, which actually initializes the game. It's like the core sort of, the thing that holds everything together, the main sort of thing. And apart from that, we've got like the bullet CPP file, which is mostly like a vector-based thing. It calculates the orientation of it using vectors, and I'm not very confident with vectors, to be completely honest. Anyway, right, let's look at committing the final change using Bitbucket. So if we do git space add space dot, we will add all the changes that have been made to the file, and then we'll do git commit space m, and then we'll do final commit with final changes. And then there's 5 changes that's been 5 files that's been changed, 8 insertions and 16 deletions. So we will do git space push to push the changes up, and then we'll let that load. Here we go. There wasn't that many changes, I don't think, in the final iteration. There you go. Awesome. So that's been done. And then if we open up this, refresh the page, and the updates have been pushed, and it says it's been updated just now. So if we go on to here, we'll actually look into this. This is where all of the files have been saved onto Bitbucket. We can have a look on the commits, and you can see this my version control I've been updating as regularly with all my different changes that I've made across the entire project. So we've got all the worksheets up and done and dusted. It took me a long time to be able to get all the errors fixed when I was doing the worksheets. However, I got it done in the end. Added new background, changed the dimensions of the game window, respawn locations, one-time respawn for the NPC boss. This was when I was playing around with the initial respawn loop. fixed the bug, wasn't taking damage, correcting the skeleton. They were sharing health at one point, and I managed to fix that. Added sound effects. The sound effects I'm really chuffed with, because I wasn't expecting to get that done. I actually didn't manage to get some sound effects in. Added sound effects for each of the skeletons, sound effects for enemy being hit, and de-amplified the music. I had to go in and use Audacity to affect the audio levels of the actual sound files. I created my own sound file as well, which is the you win or whatever it was. Tried creating a do-while loop, and then we've got the final commit that I've just set here as well. And very finally, I just want to show you quickly my game test log and results. So I went through a process of testing every feature in the game that would appear on the screen. So we got the player movement in all directions and shooting by testing all input for functionality. Each test has got its own ID code for me to go through and do additional tests or retests afterwards to say that I'm retesting that version. The action of which it takes to be able to test. So the user presses the up key to move the sprite up, so the player sprite up, and the input key would be the up key. And the expected results were to be, say the character sprite will move up the screen for as long as the up key is pushed, and then the expected results were performed, which gave it a pass. So I've done this on a hell of a lot of different features within the game, and I've written a conclusion as well. Thanks very much for watching. I hope I've covered everything that needs to be covered. Yeah, awesome. Thanks very much.